Shut up, Richard.
Hey everybody, Jeff Stone here with another episode of MagicReviewed.com. And are we looking at diverse deceptions? I don't think so. Are we looking at more diverse deceptions? We are looking at further diverse deceptions. Richard, shut up after this.
Shut up, Richard.
No, I mean, I wasn't me saying, Richard, you need to shut up. That was me saying he did shut up after this. Except he didn't, and I hope he never does, because I freaking love reading this guy's stuff. Amazing. And this is no exception. This is something like, 64 pages, and it's $40. And again, in each one of these videos about these books, I tell you that they are comparable in price to the booklets that came before them back in that era. So, what do you get in this one from the Optimizer? You get effect number 1, the Mirage envelope. This is Richard's update on Bob Cassidy's White Dwarf idea. If you know that, it's a clever way to get information that you shouldn't have access to. And of course, the Optimizer did it again and came up with some clever stuff. Just leave it at that. Effect number 2, cards in pocket. So this is a standard thing that you've seen people do if you have a cyclical deck. I'll just say that much. And then, shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. And then cut, spectator cuts. And then sight unseen puts a card in each pocket. One in the left pocket, one in the right. And then you just read the airwaves, I guess, because you're not reading their mind because they don't know what the cards are. And you tell them the cards in your pocket are this and that. So that's pretty standard. But the Optimizer strikes again. And he has this beautiful trick. And I don't mean trick as in a card trick or a magic trick, but this concept, tricks of the trade kind of a trick. Where he says to the spectator, and I won't give you all the scripting because it's part of how this thing works. But he says to the spectator that, okay, you have the, whatever it was, 3 of hearts and 9 of diamonds, whatever. Now my question to you, spectator, do you want the 3 of hearts to be in your left pocket and thus the 9 of diamonds in the right, or do you want it to be the other way? Whatever he says is right. And it's not like we talked about a few reviews back where sometimes you have a miracle, other times you don't. No, it's always a miracle. The way he does it, it's just that Richard Osterlind optimization. Killer. Really smart. And that's a routine I've never done. I guess I do a variation of it. I do basically Sankey's effect, which I believe is called Third Eye. It's the one where you put a doll's eye in a paper bag that's got 3 cards in it, and you see through the doll's eye and what the cards are in the bag. So it's kind of the same sort of thing. It uses the same basic method. But this uses that extra thing that Osterlind added that just makes it to that next level. That guy's brain, man. Someday, I hope he never dies, but if he ever does, I hope science will study his brain and disseminate thinking and the workings of it to the world. Because, man, the dude is brilliant and clever. Next up, the Owl-Man routine, which the short version of that effect is hard to explain in short words, but you meet up with a person and you give them 2 envelopes and you have them write their own mailing address on the envelopes. And you say, here, I want you to write a question without me seeing, seal it in one of the envelopes, and then I, the magician, will write down an answer and seal it in the other envelope, and both envelopes go to the spectator, and he's the participant, and the participant puts both letters in the mailbox, and eventually they get to him. Richard Osterlind gives us a half a dozen ways to do that. Now, I've dabbled with that plot myself, so sorry for the shameless plug, but if you check out my book 793.8, there's an effect in there in the Mellini chapter. The trick's called Don't Try This at Home. And it's a similar kind of thing where you have the spectator mail the prediction to themselves, and it's accurate. And so if you're interested in that kind of thing, you can check out my book as well. But this, he's got some great techniques on how to solve it, and some of them I could apply to my version that I do, which doesn't use any of the things that he has in here. So that's another one to check out. Next up, we get Swami, which is sort of the second of what I called workshops rather than effects. I think the Owl-Man routine was a workshop. It's like, here's the premise, how do we solve it? And here's a bunch of ways to solve it. Then the Swami is another workshop And if you don't know what that is, I'm not going to tell you, but you probably do know. And it tells you, it's everything, like what he uses, how he maintains them, what brand, like how he needs to groom himself to properly use it, backups, how to just everything, the who, what, when, where, why, how, everything about Swami. And this is the kind of thing where, again, that's another tool that I've never really used that much. There's a few places where I use it. One of my favorite type of ways to use it is a way I haven't done, but it's the type of thing I would do. And that's Harry Anderson's, I think it's called The Yard Sale. It's in his book, the Mike Caveney book, Wise Guy. And it's basically just an ultramental or an invisible deck routine, right? Where he claims that he bought this deck at a yard sale and the little kid was selling it. And how much do you think he was selling it for? Oh, 19 cents? Well, come on up. And then he does the invisible deck routine. But then the little sticker on it says 19 cents, right? So that's a cool way to do it. And the justification that a little kid wrote it helps hide the method, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, so that's the kind of way I've used it. But after reading this chapter on it, he's swaying me, man. I mean, there's sometimes where I go into one of these chapters in all three of these books where I'm like, why are you that way, Richard? Why do you say these things? Shut up, Richard. And then I get to the end and I'm like, fine, you win. I get it. I'll try it. Right? That happens a lot. It beats me into submission. Okay, miracle thought projection expanded. And this is, it's another one where I have a book, maybe I can find it right now. A card merely thought of. This is you think of a card and I will predict it. It's not quite what this Richard Osterlind thing is, but I bring it up because it's basically a psychological way to figure out what card you're thinking of. I mean, it's a whole mini treatise on it, so it's not just that. But it's sort of like that, and open prediction had a love child, maybe, is what's going on with the Osterlind thing. And this is the effect. You place a card face down on the table, and then you say to them, what card is that? And they're right? That's the kind of thing. Now, I'm sure you recognize that is not exactly the way it will look every time. But that's not a 1 in 52, the way Richard does it. It's more clever than that. And it's the kind of thing where that one situation is the miracle version, right? But the non-miracle versions are still really, really, really good. And again, the optimizer just makes it that much more gooder. So, next up, stand-up die routine. It just, he cracks me up. It kind of reminds me a little bit of things that Eugene Berger would do. He would have tricks in his arsenal like that you've read on the back of a cereal box. And he would come up with a way to make it interesting and deep and mystic with the beard and everything. And it was just amazing. Well, here is Richard Osterlind doing this very thing where at first glance, it seems like, like a little kid got a magic store prop and he's walking around and showing it to everybody. But then you look what he's doing, and no, it's way beyond that. So the short version, what's the trick? Again, this is the stand-up die routine. It's sort of a thing you can do strolling, or you could do it in a more formal setting than that. But the basic idea is you have somebody take a die, short, singular for dice, right? And put it in a little container face up, with the number that they're thinking of face up, I should say. And then you have another person write down a name of somebody that they're going to think of. And then you, without looking at the die, because it's in the little container, you move from that to the other person that's thinking of the name, and you do a reading on that, and then you reveal the name. And it's just, and I've seen him do variations of that. I think I have every one of his DVDs. And so if that full routine is on a DVD, I've seen it, but I know I've seen him do the thing with just the name. And it's just the way he presents it. He doesn't care that, he doesn't worry about, here, I'm going to have you write this down. The reason I want you to write it down is because I don't want you to, do this and blah, blah, blah. And no, he just says, write it down, and then I'll tell you what you wrote down. I mean, he doesn't care to have to justify anything. He just does it. And I imagine his inner monologue is something like, don't dare question why I had you write it down, because that's the way it works and that's the way you have to do it. So just do it. That's how I imagine what's going on in his head. And he exudes that in a confident, not arrogant, and not even rude way, but just in a charming is probably the right word, a charming way that people just believe it. Now, I don't think I've hidden this information, that sometimes I find him a little boring in presentation. But even in those moments, even if a layperson found him boring, you walk away from that thinking that dude can read minds, even if it's a little boring. It's so, and I'm on a quest with my Stone Cold Mental series to de-boringify our mentalism. This is not a pick on Richard thing, because this guy is brilliant and clever, and I think that sort of style works for him. It's just, look, I'm just doing demonstrations of this actual power that I actually have. And so sometimes there's no fluff and frills, but he has this energy. And I know I'm talking a lot about seeing him perform, but it's coming across in the books. That's why I'm bringing it up. And in the previous video, that was the more diverse deceptions with the name a number, name a number, name a number. It's that kind of thing. Just that attitude. Look, do what I say and I will blow your mind, right? It's great. Anyway, so not everybody can get away with that. Okay, newspaper prediction. So this one is, you get a sheet of newspaper, tear it in half. Which half do you want to keep and throw away? And there's no equivoque here. You do what they say, and then you keep tearing in half until you're down to one little piece. And then you hold it up so everybody can see it, and you have some people read a few of the lines on it, and it is an ungimmicked newspaper that you're using. And then there's an envelope that's been in view the whole time. Somebody else opens it up. There's no switching, and there's no switching in the envelope or what the prediction is or whatever. And they open it up, and it predicted what was going to be on that little piece of newspaper. The method is just the most low-tech thing ever, and it just works. That's the stuff, that's what I love about him. So that's what that is. We have the direct book test. This is the only one where I have a minor issue. It is a direct book test, right? You have 4 books. You use this book to have a page selected, and let's say the page was 72. Then everybody else in your books, the other 3 books, turn to page 72. You look at the first word, you're thinking of this. You look at the first word, you're thinking of that. You go right to the center of the page and think of a word right in the center of the page. And this is the word you're thinking of. That's direct, and it's bold, and it's great. The only issue I have with it is the way you have the page selected. The funny thing is he uses this, what I feel is a bit of a convoluted method where they drop their business card or your business card into the book as you riffle it or whatever, and then you go to none of the books are gimmicked, by the way, just for the record. And then you go to the page that the business card fell in. It just seemed a little bit too much procedure, especially for a guy like Richard who doesn't really do a lot of procedure. He even mentions in the book that there are other ways to get that page. And he said, use the Hoy method, which is exactly what I would have done were I to do that book test. I would use the Hoy method. And if you don't know it, then go read the Bold Miracles of Dr. Faust or something like that. It's on library.com, and they sell it there for just a few bucks. Bold and Subtle Miracles of Dr. Faust. Anyway, the Hoy book test is in there. Anyway, so that's the only thing I had a minor issue with, but other than that, it's totally fine. It is just a direct book test. The only thing I would say, this is one of the few where I don't feel like he's really added much to that. That's a pretty common, that is the Hoy book test. You have 2 books and you use this page, say stop me anywhere. Oh, what page is that? It's 42. Okay, you turn to page 42 and then I read their mind, right? That's the Hoy book test. It's just that with 2 more books, right? But there is some little bit of build in the way the presentation goes that I think is important and useful, and a little bit that will get you thinking about your book tests, right? Okay, and then we have some final thoughts, and that is the name of the last chapter, some final thoughts. If you've ever watched or read Richard Osterlind, you'll know, like all of us, he's very opinionated, and sometimes he does come across as, how dare you not think about mentalism the way that I do, which is the only way, the right way, the best way, there is no other way. And sometimes that does rub me a little bit the wrong way. And you do see that throughout this trilogy of books. It's not enough to turn me off from reading the books, because I've gained so many cool ideas and things where I'm like, yeah, I'll try that. I'll try that out. because that's simple and easy and blah, blah, blah. The only reason that frustrates me is because I've seen, particularly in his videos, where he'll make a claim about something that you must always do or something that you must never do. And then a couple tricks later in the lecture or the video or whatever, he'll do that thing that he said you must never do, or he will not do the thing he said you must always do or whatever. And which is fine. We all goof that up and we all have theories of what's the perfect way to do it, and we don't always do it that way. We're all learning. But what bothered me about it was that one of them was on a Penguin Live lecture, and that was back when people could tweet in while the lecture was happening, and somebody sort of called him out on it saying, well, wait a minute, how does that fit in with the thing you just said a minute ago? And he basically just brushed it off like, what? I don't worry about stuff like that. I don't care about stuff like that. I'm like, dude, 5 minutes ago, you cared a lot about stuff like that. So you do get some little bit of contradictions like that. But, I'm going to quote a guy you probably don't know, Dr. Ken Berry. And he says, this is what I think I believe right now, right? And I think that's a good way to think about life. This is, the way I always said something like that was, as far as I know, this is true, as far as I know up to this point in my life, right? That kind of wording, at least in my head, I wouldn't always say that out loud. So the fact that there is some contradictions throughout, minor, that's because he's a human.
I'm only human.
It just sometimes it does get to me a little bit. Just a little bit. But you've seen, I've been raving about these books. So I'm going to shut up about them. This is the final one in the trilogy. We are done, unless he decides to make a Hitchhiker's Guide version of a trilogy. Then we got 2 more books to look forward to. Anywho, 4.5 stars. Stone status of gem with a capital G. That's it for this one. Now it's time for you to like, share, comment, subscribe, buy me a Diet Dr. Pepper, and listen to the random iTunes song of the moment, which is Break It To Me Gently by Juice Newton. Oh, listen to that guitar riff. That's beautiful right there. It takes me back to the 80s. I don't know how many Juice Newton stories I have. Yeah, I got nothing, guys. Sorry to be such a boring outro on this one. So, since we're done with the random iTunes song of the moment, how about this? Tune in next time where we take a look at... That's it for this one, folks. We'll see you next time. Peace out. To the booklets that came before them back in the I almost poked my eye out just then. Back in the 1920s or whatever.
Shut up, Richard.